This week, let's talk about supply chains. Lots of different types of supply chains, and you'll understand why in just a minute. Okay, so this week we're going to talk about supply chains and lots of different types of supply chains. So start thinking about some of the more obscure supply chains that you've come across, because I would love to hear some of your comments down below. And actually, if you're new to the channel or you've been watching for a while and you're not subscribed yet, do hit that subscribe button, hit the bell, and you'll get notified every time we have a new video coming out, which generally comes out on a Tuesday evening, Sydney, Australia time. Okay, so we're going to be talking about different types of supply chains this week. Why? Well, I've noticed a little bit of a trend on some of the comments and questions that I get, and people quite naturally are comparing what they see other companies do or they read about, and they're sort of thinking maybe that will work for my company. And a lot of these questions, I think, are from people fairly new to supply chain. But I know a few people who've been around the industry for a while as well who should probably watch this, because what I'm going to talk about is how supply chains vary and why we need to be a little bit careful about comparing ourselves to other supply chains or trying to copy what they're doing. Okay, so let me talk about some of the supply chains I've come across. And if you're not aware, I don't do YouTube as a business or as an income. My day job is actually running a consulting company called Logistics Bureau, and I've been doing that for 24 years now, I think. And so we have done hundreds, in fact thousands of different client assignments in supply chain and logistics across every single industry, I think across 25 countries now. I was talking to someone yesterday, and I think as of today we're doing projects in about 10 different countries. So why do I mention that? Well, I'm going to be sharing some of that sort of background of experience, and if you have any questions about, different industries' supply chains, by all means put them down below, because we've probably done some work in that industry. So let me get you thinking a little bit about how supply chains differ. So first of all, let's not think about some of the more common ones. Let's think about building products. I've done a lot of work with building products companies, cement and piping and all kinds of stuff, timber. Think about their products for a moment, and let's pick on cement products. So think about things like cement piping, sewerage piping and all that kind of stuff. Imagine running that supply chain. It's a little bit different to grocery retail, isn't it? You've got huge products that sometimes weigh 10 tons. You've got products that maybe you can only fit one on the back of a truck. You've got products that are perhaps not super high value and don't have a very high margin. So you've always got to be thinking about that, whatever your industry, what's the value of the products we're selling, what's the gross margin on the products we're selling, because to a certain extent, that drives how we're going to manage our supply chain. So in the building products industry, because the margins aren't that great, you haven't got a lot to play with, and you've got to have very efficient sort of, minimizing cost type supply chains. And so it's all around the efficiency of your supply chain, looking at things like really effective freight rates and so on. And there's some difficult aspects as well to building products. I mean, it might not be just delivering to big box retailers, for example. You're delivering to construction sites, you're delivering to major highway projects, and that in itself, creates an enormous challenge. It's the scheduling of the deliveries, weather has a massive impact. You might be delivering product to a building site, and it's raining, they can't pour the concrete, and so everything gets put back a couple of days, and then all the deliveries of the associated products get put back. So that's probably, I think, one of the trickiest industries to manage a supply chain in. So if you're looking for a supply chain job and you want a challenge, get into something like building products. I mean, that's amazing what those guys have to juggle every day of the week, particularly with some of those big construction projects. So there we go. There's a building products, a little bit different. The other aspect, of course, with building product companies is that a lot of the products are made fairly locally. So again, you think of concrete type products or ready mixed concrete, concrete bags, bags of concrete, cement. So you don't want to be moving that stuff long distances because it's very heavy, it's fairly low margin. Again, you want to keep the cost down, so your supply chains tend to be quite reliant on more local production. Oh, I hope that's not too noisy. We've got one of those big sort of branch chopping machines going outside. Okay, so there's building products. Grocery retail, that's one that we'd all be familiar with. How are those supply chains different? Well, vast product ranges. So we're looking at maybe 20 to 40,000 different products in your average grocery retail store. Big focus there is on-shelf availability. If it ain't on the shelf, the customers can't buy it. So that's a massive focus, making sure that inventory is managed correctly, that deliveries are on time, that the shelves are always full. I'm trying to remember a statistic. I think it's for every 1% improvement you can get on-shelf availability, you'll get something like 1/4% lift in sales. So that can be huge. What else with grocery retail? You've got temperature ranges. I mean, typically you've got three. You've got ambient, chilled, frozen, so that adds complication. You've got all the sort of use-by dates, locations all over the place. Some very distant. You've got high-density locations in the cities. So grocery retail is probably a supply chain where it's all about efficiency and great systems and visibility of product movement and inventory and so on. So again, if you're thinking of getting into supply chain, grocery retail is a fantastic industry to get into. Let's think of a different one again, healthcare. So I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of healthcare companies over the years, hospital groups, pharmaceutical companies, medical devices, you name it, government health departments. And it's quite a different supply chain. You can imagine why, because there isn't so much the emphasis generally on cost. It's all about patient care. It's about compliance, making sure that medicines are stored in the right way, the right temperature, things like drugs of dependence, that they're going through the right security measures, tracking manufacturing dates instead of recalls, absolutely making sure you never run out of stock. I can remember talking to a group of NUMs, nursing unit managers at a hospital a while back, and we were talking about how they manage their inventory. And the manager who was looking after the maternity ward, her view to inventory was, on a Friday evening, as long as my ward stocks are at 100%, I'm happy. She does not want to run out of anything, any sort of materials over the weekend when they're delivering babies, So, but conversely, they had a very good focus, for clinical staff. I was amazed. They had a great focus on managing stocks and the cost implications and really trying to manage everything efficiently. So healthcare is pretty different. Again, if you're thinking of getting into supply chain, fascinating industry to be in from a supply chain perspective, with that added sort of element of dealing with people and people's health and lives and so on, gives it a very different flavor and a different focus. Oil and gas. Done a lot of work with oil and gas over the years, so mostly onshore gas drilling, oil mining as well. Those sorts of organisations, again, have a very different supply chain focus. So a lot of it is about maintenance of equipment, drilling equipment, underground mining equipment. So they have huge stocks of maintenance spares, and you've got to make sure that those are available. They also have stocks of major subcomponents, rotables, they're very often called in the industry. So sub-assemblies, engines, gearboxes, hydraulic systems, those sorts of things, so that they can be swapped in and out and machinery can be kept going. So from an inventory perspective, those sorts of industries can be a real challenge. I was lucky enough to work in the LNG, the liquefied gas industry for a little bit, where they're putting together, plants taking the gas from the gas fields and then shipping it offshore and so on. I had these massive gas turbines, basically, that were working in the compression of the gases, I think. And they had a complete turbine as a spare, $10 million piece of equipment or something, because they couldn't afford for machinery to go down. And it's like that in the oil and gas sector. You're losing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, per hour, per day if machinery is down. So it's all about, equipment uptime and very much a focus on inventory availability and maintenance and so on. So again, slightly different focus, isn't it, with supply chain. And then there's some really obscure industries. Let me mention a few, and I really hope you can think of some and comment down below. Years back, I did work with a seed company, and forgive me if I get this wrong, but we were looking at their forecasting and their procurement and their stock management and all this sort of stuff. I think it was tomato seeds that had something like a 5 or even a 10-year procurement cycle. Because to get the tomato seeds, you had to have the seed producing plants, and then those were basically bred from a whole series of other plants, and the whole process apparently took years. So, if you said, I want 1,000 tons of tomato seeds, you can't just turn it on because it's all sort of planned over a very long time frame. Another example of that, if you want some left field industries, would be the timber industry. So I'm based in New Zealand, and New Zealand? No, I'm not. I'm in Australia. I'm going to tell you a story about a timber company in New Zealand where they were renowned for growing, fantastic quality timber. Straight trees with very few sort of knots and branches and all this kind of thing. Superb for the furniture making industry. And the lead time till the time you plant the tree to when you harvest it, let's say it's something like 20 years. During that 20-year period, the whole furniture industry changed. And the furniture was no longer made out of high quality solid wood, it was made out of chipped wood. And suddenly, all of these fantastic quality trees were now being chipped and pulped, it's really saddening. But, it's just an example of how you can be managing your supply chain and then the whole industry changes. So what's happened with most supply chains over the last year or so? A lot of supply chains have had to change dramatically. During 2020 and 21, of course, the whole COVID pandemic has changed our supply chains. And now so many businesses are having to flex a little bit. They've got more online sales. All of that is reflected through their supply chains. They have to have supply chains that are much more effective at dealing with e-commerce sales and home deliveries and all that sort of stuff, which is a very different profile. So, that's a big challenge in supply chain right now, isn't it? Along with, the trend to a lot more people working from home. A friend of mine works in an office products company, and I can remember she runs the supply chain for them. I was talking to her back in early 2020, a couple of months into the pandemic, I said, how are you guys going? She said, it's hard to keep up. Everybody is now working at home, desks, printers, you couldn't get a webcam, for months. So all of these different challenges that we've seen over the last couple of years are interesting. But the point of the video this week was really just to get you thinking about different industries. So particularly if you're early in your career in supply chain, don't think of supply chain as having, like this set of rules and processes that are the same across all businesses and all industries. They're absolutely not. And so that's why I just wanted to share with you today, some very different industries: building products, grocery, retail, healthcare, oil and gas, and there are going to be loads and loads of others where the principles are the same, but how you execute your supply chain and how you manage it day to day are very, very different. And that's what makes the industry so fascinating. So, have you thought of some really obscure, left field, or very different types of supply chains that I haven't mentioned? Do comment down below. I would love to hear. I love hearing about, unusual supply chains and some of the things that you have to cater for. So do comment down below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy these videos, do make sure that you like and comment and share. I actually go through all of the analytics and I look for which videos had the most likes, the most comments and things like that, because that tells me that those are topics that you want to hear more of. And so you can help me pick the topics by doing that. So thanks for watching and see you next week. Bye for now.